artists for social services. And if there was, it came with all the red tape or the lack of general awareness of these processes. Number three, lack of institutional support for arts education in our schools. There were issues such as the lack of resources or equipment to educate students, or the mode of teaching was in English, which may not have been the best for our learners who might be able to grasp these concepts better in their local vernacular. Or even the general lack of prioritization of arts education vis-a-vis STEM subjects. Number four, it was very costly to repatriate artwork back to the Philippines when these were featured in shows that were not necessarily trade in nature abroad. Imagine getting to exhibit part of the Philippine heritage and history abroad only for it to be assessed for import taxes when they return. If anything, that is a big blow to the artists as they ended up unappreciated by the state. We are thankful that the Philippines has now signed on to the ATA Carne, which hopefully would address this issue. For the benefit of everyone unfamiliar and to our viewing public, the ATA Carne are temporary admission papers which would allow the free transport of goods across borders and a temporary admission into a customs territory with full relief from duties and taxes pursuant to the Istanbul Convention. And number five, the late release of grants from the NCCA to our artists for their participation in art fairs. What happens is that the artists have to advance these payments, relying on reimbursements and subjecting themselves to the tedious requirements needed in order to claim these. So, are they still grants if you have to advance the expenses for putting up an art show in the province? From there, some areas of collaboration that came about was to first revisit and reactivate the local culture and arts councils of the LGU, which under a DILG memorandum encourages the creation of LCACs in every LGU. This was eventually made a mandate under RA number 10066 or the National Cultural Heritage Act and of course Republic Act 11904 or the Philippine Creative Industries Development Act. However, we feel that it's not enough to incentivize our LGUs to convene these LCACs. We call upon the DILG to recalibrate the criteria for awarding the seal of good local governance by increasing the weight or the points ascribed to the development of arts and culture in the locality. This is in recognition of the actual economic benefits investing in arts, culture, and creativity can actually bring, which I will expound upon more later. There was also a proposal to make a database of all the galleries in the Philippines for the information of the general public and to provide an avenue for collaboration and co production among them. In our own district, the 4th District of Pangasinan, the Anakbanwa Creative Residency Program will be tying up with Bacolod's Orange Project for the upcoming Galila Arts Festival in March, a historical collaboration between Negrense and Dagopeño artists. We hope that the NCCA, or the soon to be convened Philippine Creative Industries Development Council, can develop this plan so it could be appropriately funded at the opportune time. We are also optimistic that in the final findings of the Department of Education's K-12 curricular review, that there would be major shifts and reforms towards increasing arts education and arts appreciation for our young learners. We also hope to forge more collaborations between the visual arts sector and the design sector, such as fashion, architecture, textile, and interior design, to develop functional creations to foster an intellectual property ecology. We're starting to see more of this actually when you look at artworks being plastered in tote bags or in art toys or in merchandise like t-shirts. So there's really an opportunity for various creative industry to actually cross collaborate amongst one another and increase and expand the breadth and scope of the intellectual property ecology of our creative output. There are other issues in the field, such as art forgery, which is better addressed through strengthening the Art Forgery Act. Imagine the art forgery technical panel includes a national artist. So, how exactly will a national artist be able to vet if the artwork of another artist is a forgery? So, there needs to be really a recalibration of the composition of who will belong into this art forgery panel. There's also a lack of participation in intellectual property remuneration by our artists, which can be strengthened by revisiting the intellectual property code. There's actually a provision in the law that says that if you were to resell an artwork to somebody else, the artist who owns the artwork is entitled to a portion of the sale. However, if the artwork is sold in private, how will the artist necessarily know if his or her artwork was resold? So that's actually in the law. It's just really hard to implement. And that's why if you look at NFTs now, or non-fungible tokens, which uses blockchain technology, it's able to track the provenance of the artwork such that if I resell my NFT to another buyer, then the artist automatically gets remuneration from the sale. So it's something that digital was able to solve that our analog and even our existing policy environment still has to play catch up to. And of course, the lack of opportunities for arts residencies, which we shall pursue through a bill that has been referred to our committee. So currently, we have the Galila, or rather the Anakbana Creative Residency Program in Buban. In a contiguous province in La Union, there's the Emerging Islands Arts Residency. You also have in Bacolod, you have the Orange Project, and there are many other private sector led arts residency programs throughout the country. So imagine if each LGU city or province, each of the 81 provinces had their own arts residency programs. We are providing opportunities for artists to get to know the local community and also for the local community to learn from all of these outside artists to be able to provide a more holistic spillover and multiplier effect for a certain territory. Next, we investigated the placemaking design sector as a whole in a series of 5 hearings last Congress. One heavily discussed topic was the practice of architecture in the country. And some of the issues that arose were number one, the loose implementation of the IRRs of Republic Act number 9266 or the Architecture Act of 2004. It was reported by our stakeholders that while it is required for architectural designs and plans to be submitted for the issuance of permits, government agencies do not strictly follow this, thus allowing the construction of ill-designed, unsafe infrastructure, which thus jeopardizes the locality. Number two, there has been a failure of government owned and controlled corporations to pay an incentive amounting to 1.5% of the project cost to the architect on record, which was a mandate of the IRRs meant to cover civil liabilities. Number three, there are overlaps in the responsibilities of architects, landscape architects, and interior designers with a common source of tension in their industry. So really, how we envision the design professionals or the design stakeholders to work together is that there will be a whole of design community approach to each project. Whether it's the engineer or the architect that leads the project will be revitalized and will be more productive, more constructive if all of these design stakeholders work together from the architect, the interior designer, the landscape architect, the environmental planner, and the engineer. Such that there is a sort of this concept of Gesamtkunstwerk or total art in design. All of these design stakeholders working together for the common good. And number four, issues in their enabling law also prohibits foreign trade Filipino architects from obtaining licenses in the Philippines. This limitation was not present in the case of landscape architects, thus allowing for the elevation of the profession. This was also aggravated by the fact that there were many illegal practitioners in the field. So, can you imagine you have renowned architects who studied abroad, but then they're not able to practice here in the country because of some restrictions in the law that does not honor necessarily what they're able to study abroad. So how can we elevate the practice of architecture if this practice so continues? Our discussions here were very thorough, but they remain open-ended. We hope that for the remainder of the 19th Congress, measures meant to address these issues are heard and resolved. Of course, the Mandatory Architect Bill has hurdled the TWG stage at the Committee on Local Government, and the Design Procurement Bill is pending a hearing. Third, we look into the state of literature in lieu of the publishing and print media industry. In terms of literature as an art, they only showed opportunity for intellectual property expansion. The increase of distribution methods with the rise of ebooks, audiobooks, and podcasts, and laudable capacity building programs by both the private and public sector. However, as an industry, this sector faces major issues in sustainability brought about by number one, high cost of raw materials such as paper and ink, which accounts for 60% of cost of goods as they are imported into the country. Number two, loss of advertising as a revenue generator for publishing and print media due to the sector's pivot towards influencers and digital platforms. Number three, supply chain disruptions and the closure of bookstores with the shift to digital. Number four, lack of technical expertise in the country, particularly literary agents that can help enable intellectual property ecology. So what are literary agents? Okay, think of somebody who represents a comic book artist or a novelist and will thus pitch the intellectual property to other firms and expand its reach. For example, a comic book, if pitched to a film company, can become a film or an animated series or even a teleserye. Or for example, a book, if pitched to a theater company, can become a musical or a straight play. So we lack these literary agents who are able to really find different expressions for the intellectual property in literature, publishing, and print media, such that if you have a comic, sometimes it's just one print run of 250 copies sold in a trade show and then it ends there. Sayang naman. Ang dami-daming mga magagandang mga comic books sa ating bansa na pwedeng-pwedeng maging source of intellectual property expansion. Number five, copyright violations due to piracy. So sa pelikula, maraming dina-download na mga pirated films. Akalain ninyo, yung mga libro at mga comics at magazines ay nada-download na rin through illegal means. So kailangan natin i-address yung intellectual property enforcement ng Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines. To address at least the issue on high cost of raw materials, we in the Arts, Culture, and Creative Industries block will be filing a bill this afternoon, which will move for VAT exemption of advertising and print media to incentivize advertisers to engage with the sector, which can hopefully revitalize it. So the bill is about to be filed. If you would like to co-author, you are more than welcome to. Ito po yung request sa atin ng Book Developers Association of the Philippines, pati na rin ng United Print Media Group, yung samahan ng lahat ng mga periodiko, mga newspaper at magazines sa ating bansa. Now, let's move on to audiovisual media. So just a couple of weeks ago, we concluded the third of three very thorough, very insightful hearings on the state of the film industry as prompted by the resolution filed by Deputy Speaker Camille Villar. in the hopes of finding a way to fund or support a potential Oscars campaign for the Best International Feature Film. At the onset, these hearings drew flack from the media for the simple question, kailangan pa bang mag-congressional hearing para makasali tayo sa Oscars? The short answer is yes. One of the major findings was that a major Oscars campaign with all the marketing expenses that it incurs comes with a hefty price tag of about $2 million or more than 100 million pesos. So meaning to say, yung mga pelikula na nanonominate sa Oscars, suportado sila ng kanilang mga gobyerno dahil sa ROI ng isang Oscars win para sa isang bansa. Kung gusto mong mangampanya for an Oscars Best International Feature, lahat ng mga juror, kailangan nilang mapanood yung pelikula mo. How will they do that? Number one, kailangan makakita sila ng billboard along Hollywood Boulevard, which costs money. Kailangan makakita sila ng ad sa Variety magazine or sa Hollywood Reporter, which also costs money. Three, kailangan nilang mag-attend ng mga junket, ng mga dinner, ng familiarization tours para mas makilala nila yung pelikula. So meaning to say, to be able to launch a successful Oscars bid, kailangan mangampanya. At usually, yung mga progresibong mga bansa, alam nila to, kaya sinusuporta nila ang kanilang industriya ng pelikula. If the government wants to support quality films on an international level, budgetary support, as the private sector cannot afford it on their own, is needed, and because the return on investment for the country is much higher. As explained by our stakeholders during the hearings, the most obvious impact a country can gain I will say that being recognized in the Oscars puts you on the cultural world map. Just like how South Korea unsurprisingly got an influx of inbound tourists when Parasite won Best Picture at the Oscars. In fact, official South Korean tourism organizations have special tours purely for parasite-related spots. I'm sure yung Crash Landing on You, meron ding tour na you get to eat kung saan kumain si Hyun Bin, 'di ba? Or pupunta ka ngang sa nag-date nung of teams to attract more people to come to our shores. An Oscar nomination or a win is free marketing for a place and for the film. As succinctly put by the Directors Guild of the Philippines, once you're recognized globally in terms of cinema, it's not only the talent that is recognized, but the whole country. This affects tourism and cultural sectors. On the part of the actors who snag these major awards, a 2020 study shows that their salary also increases by at least 20% following an Oscars nomination, which leads to better productivity and sustainability of workforce. This also turns global attention to the potency and power of Pinoy talent, which could also create more opportunities for our working actors to showcase their talent on a global platform. You know, on a related note, I remember having a conversation with Leia Salonga in one of our hearings for the performing arts and the music sector. And we kind of shared some insights about her ascent to how, you know, she starred in Annie, and then she auditioned for Miss Saigon, and then eventually she became the voice of Jasmine and Mulan, Disney princesses. And it was very interesting to note that Leia had to go outside to be able to be recognized inside. I guess you can say the same of Dolly De Leon, who has been working in the entertainment industry for decades. But not a lot of people knew about Dolly De Leon. I of course did because I also hail from the theater sector, of which Dolly is one of the most respected theater actors in the country. And also, I do get to see her in film, but it's only now that Dolly is having a moment. She is a cover of Philippine Tatler right now. I mean, she had a feature in Philippines as well as in the international Vogue title. But it's because nakilala si Dolly sa Triangle of Sadness before siya kilalanin dito sa ating bansa. So, in a way, medyo hindi ko maintindihan kung bakit ganun yung colonial mentality at kung bakit yung kalakaran na sisikat ka lang dito pag sumikat ka sa ibang bansa. But certainly that has to change. And going back to the whole issue of Oscars, pag maging Oscar-nominated actor ka, di ba, pag bibida ka sa isang pelikula, sinasabi na parang starring winner Roberts, starring Oscar winner Brad Pitt, or Oscar nominated star Dolly, di pala nominated si Dolly, pero Golden Globe nominated star Dolly De Leon. So again, these are since race country. These hearings of film is not as accessible as it used to be. The Cinema Exhibitors Association of the Philippines, in its position paper, gave a simple breakdown of the current 320 peso movie ticket, which is the current standard price. Okay? 10% of this goes to amusement taxes na pinapataw ng ating mga local government unit. The remaining value will be split between, syempre, cost of production. It costs millions to produce a film, which is roughly already 55% nung kinikita ng isang pelikula. Yung natitira, napupunta to sa mga cinema operators na ginagamit nila yung share nila sa isang movie ticket, pambayad sa mga manpower, utilities, rent, advertising, and other operational expenditures, which remain generally fixed, whether or not a movie is a box office hit. Meaning to say, pareho ang renta at binabayaran sa isang pelikula, whether Avengers man yan or isang indie film. In fact, this 320 peso standard movie ticket is comparable to the minimum wage of some regions. It is even higher than the 316 peso minimum wage in BARM. So, paano nila ma-afford manood ng isang ticket kung syempre yung kikitain ng minimum wage pupunta dun sa mga basic goods and commodities? Furthermore, it is estimated by the PMPPA, or the Philippine Movie Motion Pictures Producers Association, that gross sales of films should amount to 270% of your investment para mag-break even. It's really not good business. Usually 50%, sana maka-ROI ka na. Pero kailangan yung pelikula mo kumita ng 270% para man lang mabawi mo lahat ng gastos mo. What does this mean? Kung ang budget ng isang pelikula ay 100 million pesos, kailangan mong kumita ng 270 million pesos sa tilya para man lamang maka-break even. I don't think that's sustainable, and I don't think that's good business. And there are a lot of factors that we can attribute to this, such as sa dami ng mga buwis na binabayaran ng mga filmmakers natin. In fact, tatlo ang binabayaran nilang buwis. Una, yung income tax ng lahat ng talents na hinahire nila. Number two, yung VAT